Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Devil's Cut, a horror podcast about all the things that go bump in the night. If it's spooky, scary, or spine-tingling, we're here to talk about it. I'm your resident man-boy possessed by a devil, Matt Young, and here with me, as always, is my co-host, the skeleton everyone should want in their closet,
Eric Rossi.
How are we doing today, Eric? Are we feeling violent?
We are doing amazing. We are thriving. We are...
We're in our summer glow right now.
We are.
It's just the season is starting, and it could not have started with more of a bang.
Summer glow, isn't that douche company? No, that's Summer's Eve.
Newsflash: Spooky Wife lets us know it is not just douches. It's true. I actually think I've seen her use
their wash.
Yeah,
have nice wash.
It's true. But douches be damned, we're happy anyway. It is a wonderful time to be a horror fan with this. This is the first big summer release, right? I would say. I mean, official summer hasn't even really started yet.
I'm lumping it in.
But, I think we have to count it as the movie that kicks off the summer.
I would not disagree with you.
Yeah, so today, you saw it in the title if you clicked on the episode. We are talking about In a Violent Nature.
Woo!
Ooh, man. Now, we had a pretty good feeling about this one going in.
I saw this one coming down the pipes from a whiles off.
Which is funny because it fits in with the movie very well.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a pretty solid feeling about this movie. And I would say my expectations were far surpassed by this one.
Oh, yeah. I think they kind of undersell the press around it kept kind of billing it as like slasher movie that's shot all from the POV of the killer, and it's like kind of, but it is
more than that.
It's less like
the first person movie.
Yeah,
you think of Hardcore Henry.
You're right.
Which is
right,
what
right.
I was actually gonna bring up Hardcore Henry later.
It's less like Hardcore Henry where it's like a POV and more so like you experience the movie along with the killer versus in his point of view.
Yeah, it is kind of like that. I like I said, I was gonna bring up Hardcore Henry, mostly because I when you say a horror movie from the perspective of or a slasher movie more specifically from the perspective of the killer, I think a lot of people get sort of the Hardcore Henry like cheesy over the top
first person like style
vibe.
Yeah,
they would probably like that's what would go to their head originally. And this movie is so much more like delicate and deliberate with what it's doing. It's not like cartoonish.
No.
No. It's not. I mean, there are some crazy kills that do border on cartoonish, but in a stunning way, not in a cheesy way. I feel like this has a lot more going for it, which in turn does make me have to sort of lay the groundwork that I don't think this movie is for everybody.
No, I think this movie is definitely not for everybody, but I also think this movie is going to be wildly misunderstood
We've
by
already seen it.
Yeah, by like huge swaths of people who are going to see it.
Yeah, I think I definitely don't think the layman, the non horror regular, I don't think this movie will be for somebody who's just in it for a quick let's all go to the movies and we'll just let's watch a scary movie, it'll be fun, that kind of like moviegoer will not like this movie. But I think they'll be fundamentally bored throughout most of it.
And I think that's fine because they set out to make that movie. Like that was part of its DNA was like, we're not making Friday the 13th. We're doing something different.
Right, yeah. And I think that's, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I just, I want to lay the groundwork and just put it right up front. This movie definitely not going to be for everybody. And it's not, I don't want to sound like one of those Rick and Morty guys who's like, you have to be intelligent to
You have to have a
understand
high IQ to understand this dick joke.
Yeah, exactly. It's not pretentious like that. It's not like that's not how I'm trying to sell the movie, but it does, I would say it does behoove one who watches it to kind of have at the very least slightly deeper than surface level understanding of like what the appeal of slasher movies is to diehard horror fans, because that's really what this movie is. It's more of a love letter to people who grew up with slasher movies, who just want to who have seen so many and wanted to look at it literally from a different perspective,
From a different angle, yeah.
yeah, and also just explore what you can do with a slasher beyond just the same old regurgitation of, and not that that's a bad thing either, because we love our hatchets and our wrong turns and what else, we have infinite in the woods slasher movies,
Yeah.
right? Like there's an uncountable amount.
There's an entire sub genre of just slasher in the woods.
and I can find something to enjoy in almost all of them.
yeah.
But these guys also, they're the same way. They just wanted to see what new thing we could do with it, and I think this movie succeeds. It is slow, I will say.
At times they're slow.
I just think it's a slow movie. Even the kills are slow.
True.
They're great and gory, but they're slow. It's just a slow movie. So I think it's good to just say that, if you haven't seen it yet, but you want to, just be prepared. It's slow, but not in a bad way.
And it's what, an hour and a half?
Yeah.
If
It
it's
does feel
slow,
a little bit
you'll
longer
be
than
fine.
But again, it's more of it's sort of just this journey you have to go on, and it's a lot of it is just enjoying the scenery. Really, I mean, the film is lit and shot beautifully. It's a lot of the locations are it's in the woods, but I mean they picked a really nice looking forest to do this in.
I think people listening to this episode will soon understand the contrast of the violence and the beauty of this movie extends far outside of just what you see on screen.
Oh yeah. So I guess there's not that there's all that much plot, to go over. But if we want to do a quick the elevator pitch for the movie. So essentially,
Yes.
In a Violent Nature is about. We'll clarify this a little bit more after, but it's about a group of kids, teens.
They're in their
young
20s.
adults
They're in their 20s.
who are out camping for the weekend in the woods in.
It's in Ontario.
It's in Ontario. Do you know the name of the fictional location?
White Pines.
Yeah, so they're in White Pines, Ontario, and they're vacationing for the weekend. They're out in a cabin, standard, setup, and they stumble upon a collapsed fire tower. In which they find a pole stuck in the ground that has a locket attached to it. They then take the locket and in doing so unleash the reanimated body of a killer who is hell-bent on getting that locket back and will stop at nothing and go through everybody. Standard, I mean, it's a pretty standard slasher idea, right?
Yeah.
A guy with a tragic backstory comes back to life to murder a bunch of campers.
Pretty for par for the course.
The twist of the movie, as we've already stated, though, is that you see the entire movie from the perspective, and not like a first-person perspective, but essentially think of it more like if you've ever played a third-person, like a video game, right?
Yeah.
You're sort of doing this over-the-shoulder camera shot where we're just sort of tracking the killer as he, the kids take this locket, and then eventually he wakes up and just starts walking. And that's pretty much what you're going to see for most of the movie is this killer walking towards the locket, wherever it may be, so that he can get it back. And that might sound dull, but I found it fascinating.
Yes.
Because the whole movie really just gives you it makes you think like, oh well, this really is what Jason's doing when everybody's scurrying around, having sex, goofing, and then people start dying. Then the kids start making all these plans, like, oh, we got to get go get the keys from this house, and then we got to go here, and you got to call the police, and all these plans and all these revelations about the plot are happening. But in this movie, you don't see any of
It's
that.
just off screen somewhere else.
Sometimes the killer will walk up on a character, and you'll just hear like the tail end of like, all right, we finished our plan, let's break, and then that's when he shows up and starts wreaking havoc. So it's so interesting to see just like the snippets of the movie that other people are watching, like in any other circumstance, we'd be following these characters like so close and we'd know all the little details about their friend circle and stuff. But we're only seeing snippets of it, the same snippets that the killer is seeing.
The director talks about it like he thinks about it like the third or fourth installment to a slasher franchise that doesn't exist.
Yeah. It's I don't know. The whole time I understand. And again, before we get any deeper into it, I want to reiterate it's not going to be for everybody, and I think it's okay to not like this movie.
Yeah.
I would
disagree with you.
Yeah, I think you're really wrong, but I'm not gonna, say like your opinions about it. If you found this movie like dull or you didn't really like click with it, that's totally cool. For me, I found it like completely captivating and fascinating the whole time. Just the idea of it was so novel to me. I had never seen anything like this before, and we've seen basically what we have here is a deconstruction of the slasher movie, right?
Yeah,
and built back up from a perspective that I've never seen before. I've seen things that are close to it. I think the most notable movie that I think tries to do a similar thing would be the Behind the Mask, the Rise of Leslie Vernon. Right?
Yeah, but I mean, even that changes genre halfway through. Yeah,
at the tail end of that movie, again, it switches back to, and which is cool. Which is the cool thing about that movie.
Yeah,
is it turns from a found footage documentary. We're learning about how the serial killer does his stalking and all that. Mm-hmm. But then, it shifts into a straightforward horror movie towards the end. Also, there's a few other movies that are similar to this, but they all have, and I'd say even Scream is trying to deconstruct the slasher and build it up, playing on the tropes. This movie doesn't really do tropes. It's not playing on anything. It's also not a comedy, because I would say that Leslie Vernon and Scream heavily rely on like subverting horror via comedy.
Yeah.
Right? This movie is, there are some funny bits, like there's some, like when the gore and the kills happen, like it's funny because it's like, that was crazy.
Yeah, it's over the top.
It's so over the top and horrifying that it's funny, but that's a different kind of vibe. And obviously the when we do see the kids or the teens or whatever the characters, there's like a campfire scene where we get a little bit of a taste of all of them, and that's kind of funny too, but that's just standard like characterization. The movie itself is not funny.
No. But
Leslie Vernon, it's specifically trying to be funny.
Yeah.
Same with Scream, and I think that's what was so interesting to me about this is it was such a well thought out and successful subversion and deconstruction of a slasher without relying on like, haha, get it?
Yeah.
So that, and it was just worked so well. I'd never seen it before.
I think you set it up top pretty succinctly. It was like I had high expectations and it blew them away. I was just like so satisfied. So I felt full after a while. I was like, yes, it was exactly what I needed.
Yeah, everything about it just felt so purposeful and effective. It just hit every note that I wanted out of the movie, or any movie that was trying to do something like this. I think it really, I can't imagine anybody doing a movie like with this similar plan and doing it any better than this. So that's like our opinions on In a Violent
That's
Nature,
our preamble, which is go see it.
Yeah.
It came out this past weekend.
Yeah, it came out on Thursday, actually.
This comes out Tuesday, so it came out, the week prior. I don't imagine it's going to be in theaters over 3 weeks. Go see this movie.
See it in theaters.
See it in theaters.
Give it the box office numbers it needs. If you miss it, though, the second you can watch it, I think
it'll be on Shudder. It's a
right?
Shudder.
Original.
Yeah.
Man, it is so nice. Because I remember I subscribed to Shudder when it was a wee little baby streaming service, and there was like it had nothing on it. It had like 2 movies. Joe Bob wasn't there yet.
No, I was looking at Shudder in like 2011 when it was like, we have 6 movies.
Yeah, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna sub for $2.99.
Yep,
because I want a horror movie streaming service. That sounds awesome. I don't care if it's only got 4 movies on it. I'm gonna sub that. So I've been, with Shudder for a long time. It's just so nice to now I can go to the theaters and on the big screen get that bum bum, the little shutter.
It is quite satisfying.
It's so good to see that they're really doing it. That's awesome. But
it's heartwarming.
It is. It's a real David versus Goliath story. Shudder had to Netflix had horror movies, right?
Yeah.
Shudder had to work pretty hard to get where it is. But yeah, so with all that preamble, go see the movie. Now I'm going to sort of pass the buck over to Eric because this was really his, we both wanted to see it, but he was really, really jonesing for this. And
yeah, yesterday I had the opportunity to really sit down and sink my teeth into everything I could find on the movie. And what I dug up was really, really entertaining. We're going to start kind of by talking about some behind the scenes stuff, some production stuff, just so you can kind of get a little bit more insight as to why the final product was the way we got it. And then afterwards, we're going to kind of talk about some of the more art influenced directional kind of stuff. We're not going to really do a big plot breakdown on this one because it's kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, it's pretty plot light.
Yeah, I think you'll understand most of the movie from the things we'll be kind of going over if you haven't seen it. But I think genuinely you should go see this.
Yeah,
because the rest of this is going to be spoiler heavy. We're going to be talking about all over different parts of the movie.
Yeah, and again, it's pretty plot light. The movie doesn't expect you to pay really close attention to the backstories. It's all pretty simple and bare bones. The plot of the movie is not really what is important about it or what the point of it is. It's more of it's just a vibe of a movie, Some
have called maybe a little bit more woo than me have called it a meditation on the slasher genre, and I was like, that's not too far off.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking spoilers.
One more thing. I will say, before we get into the spoilers, if you need any more incentive to go see the movie, there is one particular kill in this movie that I cannot imagine a world where it doesn't go down in history as one of the single best horror movie kills of all time.
The internet is on fire talking about it, honestly.
Yeah, so you've likely already heard about it, and we'll talk about it later when we get into spoilers. But just if none of the rest of this got you out of your seat to go see it, if you're listening to a horror movie podcast and we go, this is one of the best horror movie kills ever made. If that doesn't get you to go see it, I don't know what you're doing listening to this.
I'm not sure how big of a release.
Unless you're family, I guess, and then we made you.
Yeah. I don't know how much of a wide release it's getting overseas, but it will be coming to Shudder. So fear not, it's on its way.
I almost just said, well, it's in Canada. the Canada, the nation to the far east.
Across the great northern...
The sun rises over Canada,
across the great northern ocean. But let's get back into the Wayback Machine, and we're going to travel back to 2021. Now... we, like I said, are lucky that we even got this movie at all, because apparently from the fucking inception, this movie was one of those straight up cursed productions. So the first block of filming begins September 2021.
Do we know when this was written?
I think just shortly beforehand. It wasn't... okay. The director was talking about how he essentially put the project together after doing like a bunch of other commercials and some smaller stuff. And he was like, you know what? I really want to get like a feature length thing done so that I can have that credit on my resume with all the other producers, and we can really start taking it our next step up to something else.
And the director in question and writer-director
correct.
is Chris Nash. And you had said this is
This is his feature length debut.
wild, dude.
He hadn't directed in like a few years, which you'll see how that goes. But they begin shooting in 2021, and the crew quickly becomes familiar with the term unprecedented torrential downpour. Everything,
Love to hear it.
yeah, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And after multiple disasters daily, the crew had become a little punch drunk. There was one point, this quote, there was one point where the electrics and the gaffers decided to dress themselves in tree bark as forest armor. That's the point of delirium that the crew had gotten to. The gaffer decided that he had become a tree man and stayed that way for the rest of the day. That was halfway into week 3 of the first block of shooting.
So delirious, your crew becomes tree men 3 weeks in.
They were showing up to set and not even being able to get to their location because what was once a woods path was now a full flowing river.
That's wild, dude.
Yeah. They had multiple
do we have,
locations just completely like washed away.
It's crazy. Do we have like a? I don't know if you looked into. Was this like a still to this day like very notable like Canadian storm? Like, does it go down as like, you know how like we're from Jersey, right? We'll always be able to be like, if someone says like Irene, we know what that means, right?
Yeah.
Like, it was that like a Canadian like, oh, that's George, man, he fucked up the Ontario for weeks.
I did not look into the specific weather name, but I imagine unprecedented torrential downpour probably at least had a first name.
Thanks, Al Gore.
The lake scene in particular was supposed to be a lot more complicated than it ended up being in the final cut. Nash says he wanted to have Johnny walk up to the lake, hear the girls from across the lake, and walk into the water, and the camera would follow him under the water over to the dock where he would drown one of the campers underwater in like a big underwater fight scene. The problems immediately started because he tried to get his little like boat underwater camera rig out on the lake and it immediately sank. So that was the first hint that it wasn't going to work. And at some point they just settled.
Should have called in Cameron. He's all about.
He's all loves those underwater cameras.
He knows how to do the underwater cam.
But they decided to just kind of go with the cut that's in the movie where they're rolling on a still shot of the girls across the lake and you see him walk out into the lake and then eventually come back out of the water.
I honestly think that's more effective anyway. I think it would have I don't think I've ever said this. It would have cheesened the kill, you know? I think it would have added too much flair to the movie that I actually think the still shot of the water makes it much more scary.
Yeah, I agree. And I think with some of the like artistic influences he was poking at, I think we'll kind of show you why he ended up going that direction, even though they had this huge, sink.
Yeah, you know what it would have reminded me of is like the scene in Pirates of the Caribbean when like Jack and Will are like in the canoe defying physics. You know, it would have reminded me of that. And I think it's better the way it is.
That's fair. But that wasn't the only issue they had on the lake that day, because as they were trying to like reconfigure the scene and get back into filming, they kept hearing these noises from like downstream, and everybody was kind of like looking over their shoulder, looking around like, what is that? What is that?
Is the bear from the story?
No, turns out some good old boys were just having a day out on the water. No one knew that they were filming out there, so there's just guys
how are you supposed to know?
Partying on a boat. Meanwhile, on shore...
Should have killed them.
Should have just murdered them.
Just snuff film it.
But meanwhile, on shore, they had their entire, fucking underwater scuba safety team on the clock, just eating up minutes while, they're trying to get these guys off the lake. And not to mention the, fancy schmancy like underwater camera equipment that they had rented that just like eating up hours of money.
Yeah, that's so funny. You know what? That's when you use like some movie tactics, right? You say like, instead of trying to force the guys off, you say like, hey, there's like, come over here, we'll get you in the movie, Just like go over here. You just direct them to a different part, and then you film your shit, and then you just never. You'll be in there. Don't worry about it.
So after the disastrous lake shoot in October, they had to call it until the next season. In spring 2020,
Next season, Jesus,
yeah, they ran out of time.
Literally,
that time is
Mother Nature said you're done. Try next year. Mm-hmm. Jeez, that sucks. Can you imagine?
No, it'd be a nightmare. I would lose my mind. A year, but spring 2022, they regrouped and they started over anew. Even more remote location in northern Ontario, near Nash's hometown in Sault Ste. Marie, which is like right on the border between Michigan and Canada.
Sault Ste. Marie sounds like a Dark Souls boss.
It does. It does. A pirate Dark Souls boss. They also had to bring in a new Johnny because during the underwater sequences, their other Johnny got sick and had to leave the project indefinitely for medical reasons.
Oh, do we have a name for the original Johnny actor?
I don't.
So we don't. Do we ever? Is any of the movie featuring?
Well, you'll see. You'll see. We'll get there.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
They brought on Rye Barrett, who joined the production for the reshoots. So at this point, they have 50% of their movie in cans. They're like, all right, well, we did all. Let's use the footage we have, and we got this new guy. They met up with him in an underground parking garage, and
what is this Better Call Saul meeting they're doing here?
They wanted to test out visuals, so they essentially built the character over again from the walk up. They're like, this is the feel we're looking for. Let's work on his walk speed and his gait until they had it locked in, and they're like, all right, this is our new Johnny.
Right.
So they start, they get back on location.
And Johnny being for anybody,
the killer,
is the name of the killer. Which I mean, that's my one pick at the movie. I would have preferred no name. I would have preferred no name because then we could just call him like the violent one, and then it would be like a much more intimidating name. Now he's just Johnny. See, the thing with Jason is like Johnny's too ubiquitous of a name. Jason a little less common, Jason like it's his name now, right? Like you name somebody else Jason, you're like, oh, like Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
Not but like there's too many Johnnies. Like so.
Yeah, Johnny brings me to a lot of different places.
Johnny just is, which I understand is like it's just like a little boy's name, which makes sense for the character, but I just feel like we could have used like a more iconic name, or no name, and then it's more mysterious. That's my one gripe, and it's very minor.
It's fair. It's reasonable. But so now they have their new Johnny in Rhyme. They do some test footage with him on location, and they're kind of like looking back and forth. They're comparing it to the old stuff, and they realize this is not going to work. They look like two totally different dudes, and they had to scrap half of their movie. They're like, we filmed half this
last year,
right in the garbage.
Those dudes who are partying, they'll never get in the movie now.
But there goes half their budget down the toilet. The second block of shooting begins in May, which is black fly season in Ontario. This fly swarm.
Cue the music.
Yeah. Give me the black flies.
Man Black Toby was the captain of the crew. He said, I'm gonna tell you boys what we're gonna do. They want to build a power dam, so we must find a way to make the little ab flow round the other way. And those black flies, the little black flies, always a black fly no matter where you go. I'll die with the black fly picking my bones in North Ontario, in North Ontario.
The fly swarmed the set, driving everyone to the brink of madness. I'm talking about like full on everyone in production hiding from visible black clouds of flies in between takes.
Yeah.
Running off set.
So apparently this is an extremely common occurrence in this area of Canada. to the point where one of Canada, and this is the movie is capped off by a Canadian folk song called the Black Fly Song, originally sung by Wade Hemsworth. It's so this event is so common and just like lived with in Canada that there's like their most famous folk song is about how many black flies are like around in this given season, you know, in the area of Canada. It's crazy. It's like, just imagine there's certain parts of like America, right, where you get like stink bug season and you can see like whole houses like coated in stink bugs and stuff like that. You know, it's just it's basically like being in like a dune sandstorm, but it's alive.
All
bugs.
flies. Yeah.
It's crazy.
They said they had some days of filming where they had to have a person standing next to the camera actively fanning flies away from the lens, and there were flies getting like caught in all the gears on the camera rigs, all the steady rigs.
And you know, that's so funny because I don't remember like mentally noting that there was a lot of flies.
There was one shot in particular I remember where like it was like you put the fucking camera in front of a corpse. It was just like so many flies.
I mean, I just kind of, I think my brain just went like, yeah, it's the woods. I didn't make a mental note of like, wow, this is a lot of black flies. I just was like, that's, you know, it's the woods, there's flies.
Yeah.
You know, but hearing about it like after the fact, I think it's insane. I can't imagine. Honestly, I would quit. I wouldn't be on that.
I mean, there was a story about the one actor, Rye, Johnny.
Yeah, Rye Barrett.
He wears a decent amount of prosthetics for when Johnny doesn't have his mask on.
Which is a decent portion of the movie, too.
Yeah. And there was one point where someone on set was looking at him and was like, why is he wearing a headband? And they realized that it was just a ring of fly bites around his forehead. Yeah.
Oh my God.
These people were getting so fucked up on set by these flies. There was a woman who was working behind the camera in a full like fly net suit who got so hot and sick she threw up through her fly net, and she was like, hey, I think I gotta go to the hospital. They apparently had at least like one hospital visit for every block of filming they had to do. It was just a fucking insane fight against nature to get this movie made.
It's a violent nature, man.
It's just so crazy to me that like after all that, they were like, yeah, we should go back.
Honestly, though, all the better for it. They persevered through it, and it showed. I mean, the movie is like so astounding, and the fact that it looks that good when apparently there was like clouds of black flies everywhere.
I mean, like everything from like there's like we talked about. There's multiple scenes where Johnny's just like walking through the woods and we're following behind him. The cameraman had to essentially learn Johnny's gait so that they could both walk in tandem through these thickets and brush.
Yeah.
As he walks like the crow flies, like in a straight line through these forested areas, they're like tripping over like gnarled, like, fucking woods and like holes in the ground and everything. There's like one cut towards the end of the movie where he's following someone else and the camera just goes completely like down towards the ground because he ate shit and fell in the camera. And they were like, honestly, it works for this take.
Keep it.
Let's just keep it.
That's crazy. That's so fun.
But yeah, with a smaller budget, they just had to cut like a ton of people and it became like a skeleton crew for like all of the reshoots.
But you know what? I every time I hear about like hardship on the set of a movie, it's always for the movies that turn out like amazing.
Yeah.
Right. Not to like derail too much, but and also not to plug like another podcast, too often. But I've mentioned it before. There's The Wizard and the Bruiser is the one of the last podcast network shows. Did a recent episode about Mad Max, the Mad Max movies, because of the release of Furiosa,
of course.
And apparently, the first Mad Max movie, well, actually, all of them for the most part were like, according to the directors, like unmitigated disasters, like throughout.
Makes sense.
And they literally, like, especially the first Mad Max movie, the director hates almost every second of it. So much shit went wrong with the original Mad Max movie. They ended up losing a huge chunk of their budget due to like disasters and stuff. In fact, again, not to derail too much, but the way they like made up money to keep filming the original Mad Max was the two directors like literally became like renegade EMTs. Like, because apparently in the outback it's like really hard to get an ambulance to your place.
Yeah, you can't get resources there.
So they bought a radio so they could respond to 911 calls faster than 911 operators because they had EMT training.
That's
so they were
crazy.
like, we're just going to be like mercenary EMTs and make up money
for the movie?
for Mad Max.
What the fuck? That's insane.
So like, I feel like anytime like a production has like real hardships and that you end up losing half the budget, the movie always ends up being so good.
And it was so funny to like hear about all of this stuff going on with it in Violent Nature, because all of the other like interviews I had watched and read barely even mentioned it. And then there's this one like random Daily Beast article I found where they were like, it was a fucking nightmare.
That's so crazy. But I honestly, like, huge applause like to the whole crew who was able to stick around and like finish it, because man, like I said, I would have left. I would have been like, no, too many flies, I'm out. Not
Bug
worth it.
apocalypse, bye. But that's about it for like the production side of things. But I did want to talk about kind of like where he's pulling influence from, because I think it really, after like looking at some of the stuff he was talking about, I think it really shows through, and I think he really nails the visuals in this movie based on what he was looking at.
Yeah. Do you think now we'll get we can like get into getting a little more granular with the details and spoilery, you know?
Yeah.
So now I guess now is the official like warning. If you really like don't, again, I don't think hearing about this stuff is really going to spoil the movie for you, because I really do think it's not about the plot. It's just about the visual like treat and just the experience of it. Hearing about it, I wouldn't imagine would deter me from it, like or ruin it for me. Because it's not like about a big reveal or anything. It's not about like, oh, I wish I didn't know about that. It's
one of those more about the journey situations.
Yeah. So I don't think, you know, this isn't one of those pause the podcast now situations. You can if you want and go see it. But I think I think even hearing about it for me would make me want to go see it even more. So we're going to get, you know, but just as a warning, we're going to get a little spoilery. We're definitely going to talk about the big kill that's all over the internet.
Yes, that's coming up. So when asked about like what his inspiration was for the visuals,
this is the writer director.
Yes, this is Nash.
He
said he took a lot of inspiration from Guy Van Sant's work in the 2000s. Three amongst his movies was Gary, which is a movie about two guys getting lost in like the desert.
Gary Busey's house.
No, it's actually Matt Damon
Terrifying.
and the other Affleck brother. But you can see just by looking at the movie, like there is a lot of that kind of like pulled back. We're looking at nature. It's a lot of naturalistic lighting and realistic approach to like camera work and shot composition. And it kind of takes the environment from being more like background and set dressing to really like a really cohesive and necessary part of the story. He was also looking at Elephant and The Last Days. Elephant's like a Columbine-esque story, and The Last Days is a Kurt Cobain-esque story where it's not Kurt Cobain,
Sort of like
but it's about like
sort of like the downfall of a
rock star. Yeah. But he said he loved those movies and he really wanted to see if he could bring that look and that aesthetic and that feel into like a genre film. So
isn't that what that always is so weird to me, that we call like horror is genre, but like every movie is a genre of some sort. I don't know why horror got stuck with the.
It's because people didn't take horror seriously for so long. So that's why we have it's a slasher movie. It's a possession movie. It's an exorcism movie. Those are the genre films. You know what I mean?
I just always found it funny that we were like, oh, it's genre, and that means it's horror. You know.
It's also like the avant-garde, like Art Nouveau stuff too. So he says the slasher seemed like the best way to do it, especially a slasher in the woods type thing, because you can really hang out in that environment. And the main thing for him in nailing the tone was just to shoot it straight up as is, stepping back and letting the scenes exist as they were, and not really aiming for like a particular tone. He just wanted to create the most like objective view on the events as he could.
Yeah, and I'm honestly, he hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's executed exactly. If that's what he was going for, I mean, it's exactly, the vision is on screen. I mean, it's like almost all the movie is just behind Johnny as he's walking through the woods.
Well, he specifically said he wanted to treat it like they were almost making like a nature documentary, where they weren't getting involved. They were just following something, or following like a letter carrier at work, just going house to house. It's not the most thrilling work in the world, but it's honest work. And that's how we approached being objective as we could be. They took it as far as to even not include much music. They wanted all of the soundtrack to either be diegetic sounds from the woods itself, or like music that can be heard like
over the radio,
yeah,
or
correct.
Something.
He says music can be such a crutch. It's so immediately emotionally evocative, and I didn't want to tell the audience to think or what to feel while they were watching it.
And it really is very, that sentiment is really noticeable throughout the film. Like you don't ever think like, oh, there's no music, this feels weird, but you do notice that there is no music, you know, because it really is like that quote says, it really does feel like a documentary where you're just following this guy. It doesn't feel like you're following a movie. It just feels like you're there.
It feels like
quietly observing like just a creature hanging out in the woods, just going about its day.
It feels like Werner Herzog is going to pop in at any moment and just be like, and here we see him trekking through the woods. Headlines online will tell you that In a Violent Nature is a redefining slasher movie. And according to Nash, he's like very humble. He's like, that's nonsense. I think it falls right into the path that every other slasher has already burned through the cinematic landscape. We're not doing anything new. We just moved the camera to a different spot. We didn't want to make this a mockery or a satire of what slasher traditionally is. We wanted to pay homage to those films, and he thinks of the movie as like a brother or a sister to those, instead of like a new burgeoning slasher franchise. He's like, this is just to kind of pair with those.
And yeah, I think that's beautiful too, because I honestly don't. I would be actively saddened if we hear about In a Violent Nature 2, right?
Yeah.
I don't want it.
No.
I don't want it. This is like perfect. It's like exactly what this guy wanted. It doesn't seem like he, based on any of that, is like, oh, I can't wait to do 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, you know, and then Johnny versus Jason. It would be like actively disappointing to hear about anything like that. So it's just so nice to hear like the sentiment expressed by the crew, the whole crew, but especially, you know, by Nash, that it's just like, yeah, it's not, it might be a subversion, it might be a deconstruction, but it's not like a goof.
Yeah, we're not
horror,
poking fun at it. It's all out of respect.
Yeah, and it really does feel like, yeah, it's just a slasher. Turn the camera to somewhere, you know, to just, it's normally over here. Now we're back here.
But with that in mind, the next order of business was, okay, we have Johnny. How do we do stuff that's very specific to Johnny? He carries around
as somebody who's, you yourself are in the middle of writing a outline for a horror idea, right? I mean, you it's gonna be a comic you want to make, right?
Yeah. And it is a camp slasher. It is difficult to avoid the classic, you know, instances of what occurs in the camp slasher. It's been done, like we said, a billion times.
Yeah, I mean, I too myself have tried to design, you know, based, you know, for my own story purposes, for my writings, trying to create a slasher is extremely difficult. To do something unique but not hokey, you know,
yes.
It's really tough. And I think Johnny in this movie, so real quick to you know, an aside, his design, right, it is surprisingly unique. I mean, for a camp slasher, I thought we'd seen it all, right?
Well, he brings a really cool flavor to it. You know, their idea was like, all right, how do we do something that's specific but not like totally generic and like or the opposite direction where it's like, oh, this is an unprecedented thing,
over designed.
Yeah,
too.
exactly. So
like the collector.
Yeah, his the collector, Jesus. But his mentality was like, all right, what can be done with like hooks and chains that can't be done with axes and machetes? He said he drew on a lot of historical influences from his childhood hometown, where the logging and forest industry are like working hand in hand close together. It was easy for him to then arm Johnny with an arsenal of like weird logging and forestry tools that make him like really iconic.
Yeah, he and I will say he is. So I mean I think the first thing for a slasher, the most important thing, the mask, right?
Yeah.
They got for me personally, I'm not going to say this is a rule, but this is my rule for me. If you want to get Matt on board with a new guy, it has to have a mask and it's got to be cool looking, or it's got to be iconic in a way. It doesn't have to be cool. It can be goofy because goofy can turn to scary, depending on the situation. So the mask, extremely important.
It needs to stand out in a lineup. If you put 10 of these hulking nod jobs like in, a line, you got to be able to look at each one of them and go, that one, that one, that one, that one. They're all different.
And that's why for me, the mask, you need a mask specifically because it's like a... behind the mask is always like a deformed guy, right?
Yeah.
Like Jason's like a monster.
Or like a really handsome guy.
That's
or someone's
that's a fun
mom.
Twist.
Ooh.
But it's usually a monster, right? Like you got the Phantom, right? He's got the half mask, iconic monster behind it. Jason, iconic mask, gross guy behind it. I mean, the list goes on. Leatherface. I mean, I actually don't know what Leatherface looks like behind his mask. Oh, we do because we watched that really bad movie.
Pretty gross. He's fucked up. Yeah.
But the it's always just like a gross guy.
Yeah.
And I think as fun as it is to look at like a prosthetic that is like, oh, look how they made that guy look like a monster, but it all just ends up being like generic, eventually. So you need like to have, it's cool to have the monster behind the mask, but you need something that's like iconic in the front face, public facing, right?
Yeah. It's the face.
Yeah. And so I honestly think that the first thing right off the bat that they do is they give him, well, for a while we're with Johnny and we even see his face up close at one point, which I thought was not going to happen.
We see mostly the back of his head until he gets a mask.
And then, we do see his face. And again, monster. Looks good.
He
looks really good. I was shocked that we actually did see him from the front eventually. But yeah, so the mask he uses is a. Do you have any information on what?
I have
it's like
tons
a fire.
of
It's a fire mask.
So
right?
The initial concept was he had come across a like some sort of crack.com article about like creepy historic masks, and he came across this like old firefighter's mask, but it was more like a diving bell situation where it was like a harder structure. So he ended up taking a lot of like the elements from that mask and reincorporating it into like a more leather-based hood, which worked out for the like fireman kind of situation.
Yeah. What was the weird like?
It's a whistle.
It is a whistle. Okay.
I clocked off the bat because I know firemen are big on their whistles.
That is what it is for, like announcing alerts and stuff.
Yeah,
right?
It's so that you can alert your crew and help other people find you within the fire.
Yeah. But what we end up with this mask is this big, like bug-eyed, like cylindrical head shape. It looks really cool and different.
Yeah.
It ends up transforming Johnny's silhouette into something that you haven't seen before, and you couple that with his signature weapons, which one of his weapons, just a standard like wood cutting axe, pretty
makes good use of it.
Yeah, and not even like a wood cutting axe; it's more of a hatchet, right? It's like a smaller,
it's a
single-handed
shorter,
axe. But
it's more like a fireman's axe because it's for breaking into stuff and destroying stuff so that fire doesn't get to it.
But what he ends up using most, I would say, is the hooks, the fire hooks, and these are dragging hooks.
Yeah, this is the logging tools.
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is the formation of the culmination of the killer. Right, is when Johnny eventually ends up at a museum, like a little parkside museum for where they go like, oh, here's the history of the logging industry.
Yeah.
And he just grabs all of the logging tools and equips himself with it. It's like literally like walking into a video game where you're like, I'm going to pick this class.
Like, oh, look at that. Yeah.
I'll do the logging class this time.
Yeah.
And so he's using these dragging hooks, which is what I don't claim to know a lot about the logging industry, but what I assume is like you have the workers, right? They hook the big hooks into logs, and you just literally just from there you drag these like hooks on chains that are stuck into the logs, and you just drag the logs through the woods. Right?
A+ deduction. That's exactly how they work.
I would imagine. Pretty simple stuff, right?
Yeah.
But what you end up getting is really a unique killer because he looks different. He's got these big bug eyes with the fire, the fire mask, and he's got the in one hand he's got a hatchet, and the other hand he's got these dangling hooks on chains. And it honestly is like, it's unique. I haven't seen it before, and it's terrifying. It's really scary.
And he's doing unique stuff with it. You know,
we've seen a killer like we had like I know he did last summer was a hook guy, but he didn't really make good use of it.
No, that was like a hook hand too.
That too, different. But these like logging hooks are a really cool, unique, iconic weapon for a slasher that just really like tickled my little slasher fancy. Right,
which like, ooh! It lends itself perfectly to this insane over the top kill that like is catching so much buzz online.
Yes. Which do we want to?
I think we talked about it briefly because I have an interesting bit of trivia for it, because it culminates in a girl up on a higher point along the edge of the lake.
This is
She's
in
on
the
a
trailer.
cliffside. Yeah.
If you've seen the trailer, you've seen the scene where the killer walks up on a girl overlooking like the valley. Mm-hmm. She's doing yoga. She's like a blonde-haired girl. She's in a yoga outfit.
It's like on this big sand berm, essentially. Mm-hmm. And she's at the edge of the cliff. He walks up behind her. And apparently from the walk leading up to the kill and then the kill itself were filmed a complete year apart.
That's so funny. Yeah, because there is occasionally not the movie isn't like a one take, right?
No.
You'll see him walking and then it'll like cut and he'll seemingly only be like 10 feet further from that cut, mm-hmm. But I can, now that I know the history of the shooting, it might just seriously be because there was like all this, hubbub.
He actually really, the actor really prided himself on his ability to do the walk consistently, because there are cuts where he's walking like through the woods and then it's the same shot composition, but they're in a new location and it like just quick cuts.
And it transitions perfectly.
It transitions perfectly, and they didn't have to change the speed of any of the footage.
That's really cool.
Which is crazy. You can do that walk so consistently. Bravo. But he comes upon this girl
Shout
doing
out to
yoga.
Ryan Barrett, man.
Oh yeah.
And he did. I was listening to an interview. He's a huge Kane Hodder fan, obviously. Because if you're gonna,
you gotta be.
If you're gonna try to be a slasher, right? And you're trying to find inspiration. I mean, who else are you gonna like turn to, right? Other than the most iconic Jason.
Yeah.
It's also really funny. I was listening to an interview where the interviewer asked him how he prepared for the role, whereas like Kane Hodder specifically and famously would isolate himself from the cast so that when he was in scene, he was so mysterious and the mystique and the horror like bled through because they didn't know him.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he was like, yeah, I tried that, but like the rest of the cast was so nice that I couldn't stay away, and we ended up being friends. So it ended up being like a cute little wholesome thing, even though he tried to do the like menacing Kate Hodder like method approach to it.
And he said he watched a lot of footage of like animals stalking prey. Like that was like a big thing for him, because the script kind of like at the forefront like puts that analogy out there that like he is animal-esque in his decision-making process. He is not like working on like a level of like normal human consciousness. And I think it shows. It really bleeds through. there's a specific scene.
I have actually a comment about that later towards the end when we get towards the actual end of the movie. But yeah,
but there's a specific shot that they showed really early on that, to me, this is all of my conjecture, but it really informed a lot of the movie's message to me, because Johnny like finds himself staring down at a mostly decomposed animal body that died in a hunting trap.
oh yeah, what was this, a coyote, or was this even an actual animal?
I want to say it was either some sort of coyote or fox,
or
but
as the
kinda
people
small.
in the movie, a coyote.
A coyote. But there was something like really powerful to me about the animal that was tethered to that specific place on the earth and left to rot, and not even like trapped for a use, like just made prey by something else, and it was left there to suffer to death. And
Not even made prey. It literally just, it was pointless.
well, yeah, it was just killed. But there was something like really
nice
peaceful
analog.
in that moment, and there's like a really, to me, like a comfortable and quiet like observation of death in nature.
Even though that corpse is horrifying.
Yeah, it's gross. It's gross, but it was kind of beautiful. And there's, like I said before, there's going to be a bunch of idiots who like only see the violent parts of this movie and consider all of the downtime as like useless. But I think it's the quiet moments of his like transitions and his movements and his like indifferent strides that like really prove that he is part of nature. Like he moves in concert with the forest. Like as he's moving through these scenes, the animals aren't upset. They're not like, you don't hear rustling in the brush of things running away from him. You hear birds chirping. You hear, the sound of bugs and just like calm, quiet, serene nature, which is contrasted later on where the final girl is running out of the forest.
Chris.
Yes. And she's screaming and her feet are pounding the dirt to try and get away from everything. And the forest comes alive. Like you hear all of these animal noises and animals screaming in the night. And then it's not till the next morning when she's like tired and she's just shuffling and moving through the forest again. It kind of pairs up with him. They're both just these like creatures who are now unified in nature based on survival. She's trying to get out of the woods and just survive, just like everything else going on.
That's fine. Well, it's interesting. I have stuff to say about that read in a little bit, but we did say we were gonna talk about the cool kill.
Yes. Okay.
All right. So we got into a beautiful tangent. Honestly, really well written. I love the thought process, and I want to talk about it more. But let's at least give the people the cool thing,
the blood,
and then we'll top it off with like our thoughts on the ending of the movie. I think, unless you have more notes, then it's fine. You can interrupt me. But
no, that's fine.
But yeah. So the kill that shook the world, right? Is so again, we have the character is Aurora, I believe. This is the yoga chick,
yes,
right?
Aurora.
So she's up on this hill, and this, like you said, the scene was like two completely different shots strung together. Eventually, we get our boy Johnny walks up on this yoga chick. She's doing yoga, and she's assuming there's a little bit of a Lebanese subplot going on.
It's Pride Month. You can say lesbian.
I just think it's funnier when we call them Lebanese. I don't know. It might be offensive to a sect of the world, but whatever. And so we get there's like a little bit of a lesbian flirtation that we get in the lake scene. So Aurora is sort of like doing yoga snarkily. She's like waiting to like hook up. She's like, no, you have to come up to the mountain to me, to her girlfriend. And then, Johnny walks up behind her, and at first she's like, oh, I was waiting. I thought you were going to take forever to get here. And then, essentially what we have is Johnny's wielding these dragging hooks, right? The girl turns around, sees him, and I love the acting of the actress who plays Aurora. This is Charlotte Cregan. I think she does like a really interesting like take on this situation, because what she does is she turns around and is immediately, understandably, very horrified by this like large man creature that she did not expect. She just expected to see her lesbian lover. She didn't expect to see this hulking monstrosity. So she immediately screams, a very good horror scream,
Pretty good.
goes to run, and then realizes, oh, I'm on a cliff.
Yeah, my options are jump off a cliff or run into him.
And this isn't the first time this happens in this movie, but like I like the fact that Johnny is so imposing that people just give up almost immediately.
They're just like scared still.
Yeah, multiple times in this movie, characters will encounter Johnny and they just go, that's it for me, I guess.
Yeah.
And this is what happens to her. Johnny then comes up behind her as she's like looking over the cliff edge and punches right through her stomach with his hook, right? Mm-hmm. You just see as his hook goes right through all her guts, and his fist and hook are hanging out the front. He then leaves the hook and then pulls his hand back out, turns her around, and you think, oh, well, she's probably dead, right? But Johnny's not done.
No.
Johnny then takes the hook, pulls it back out, slams it on her head, and you go, oh, well, now she's dead. But the actress this whole time is doing this wonderful job of, and this is something I really like to see in horror is, and something that's like, I don't know why it speaks to me so like directly. I think I find it like extra disturbing is sort of like the effect of brain trauma and how your brain will just try to continue functioning normally despite anything that's happening to it. I think one of the more notable ones in the past is like there's an episode of The Walking Dead where a character gets shot through like the back of the head through the eye with like an arrow, and for like a solid like 2 minutes she's just trying to like continue about her business. Mm-hmm. And that's like a common thing I've heard about like brain trauma like that is like you just keep going. Mm-hmm. Like you're like, as long as your brain is like able to keep doing things, it will, even though there's misfirings happening all over the place. And there's something so horrifying about that is just like the slow, like sometimes brain death doesn't happen right away, right?
No.
It's like there's something especially horrifying about like, even though half of it is like fucked up, you just the little things that your brain tries to continue to do. I don't know. Do you get that?
I agree 100%.
It's really freaky to me. And so this actress, I think, portrays it really well because she's got a hook in the brain, right? And she's still just kind of like up and about. Like it's not like an instant like collapse, right?
No.
She's still upright, she's just paralyzed with like fear and astonishment.
Now, the hook is sticking out of the front of her face, and the chain is going down and then into the front of her wound and out the back.
Yeah. And so then Johnny then spins her back around, facing out towards the cliff again. And then he takes the chain that is sticking out her back of her tummy hole that he's created, and he just starts pulling. And now remember, this girl's pretty flexible because she's a yoga girl. Mm-hmm. But that still doesn't help her spine in this situation because he just pulls and pulls, and you see like her whole upper half as she's standing upright like fold slowly, and you see like vertebrae start to pop, and he pulls and pulls and pulls until eventually what we get is a girl whose head has now been pulled through her tummy hole, out the back and through. She's essentially the most accomplished yoga pose that's ever been done at this point. And she should die happy, really, because no other yogi has done this. Johnny essentially Ouroboroses this girl.
Yes.
And it is so, and you see every painful moment of it. It is one of the most over the top, explicit, like just heinous kills I've ever seen in a horror movie.
That's what's so great about the kills in this movie is that they, other than the very first kill, they don't shy away from it. Because like a lot of slasher movies, they'll show you like, you know, the blood and the guts or like the big action sequence that gets you
but
there.
But a lot of it's like cut.
No, this is very gratuitous. It hangs in the moment.
It's slow, just like the rest of the movie. You see all of it.
There's a kill later on in the movie where a park ranger gets dismembered on a log splitter.
Yeah, and this is the park ranger who you see at the beginning of the movie, and then he's gone, and then eventually you catch him again, and you find out that he is like, he already survived the previous Johnny movie, where he was like, oh, he killed all my loved ones 10 years ago, and I'm here to put him back in the ground again.
Yeah, we love a recurring guy like that.
A recurring guy that's not really recurring because it's his first time.
yeah.
But we know, but if you know the language of slasher movies, you want to. He's the what's the name of the guy from Friday 3 or 4?
Oh, the Omen guy.
You know, he's the guy who you in the Friday the 13th video game, you could be him if you like unlocked the special. You know, he's like I'm back to take. I fought Jason when I was 8. And now I'm going to fight him again. You know, he's that character, right? He's the survivor. Mm-hmm. It's so fun. But yeah, go on.
But he dismembers him on this log splitter, and you sit there while after he paralyzes this dude with
one bare grip to the spine. He just goes
and cracks him,
snaps the spine immediately.
But you have to watch him put this guy in position to chop off his arm and then chop off his head. It's like a 3-minute scene, but they intended to film all the limbs getting cut off.
They did. Okay.
That's what was on the docket for the day. And then they had shot the first 2 parts of it, and they called cut, and they were like, I think this is enough. I don't think we can sit here for the next 5 minutes
I would have.
and dismember this guy.
I
would have too, but
Heather wouldn't have.
There was also a couple shots of him walking that they filmed where it was like full 3-minute sequences of him walking through the woods that they ended up cutting down because they're like, this already feels like enough.
Yeah, I will say that scene was gratuitous, but in a way that I appreciated. Because, I would have sat there and watched as the log splitter cut each one of his limbs. I actually found it less... I think it lessened it that he stopped after one arm and just went, cut off his head now. I think if you really wanted to sell the violent nature of it, I personally would have made the directorial decision to the theater's gonna they're already sitting through all these woods scenes. They're gonna sit there for all 4 limbs and then the head.
You have to consider now that we are talking about this production from hell, which I'm sure they were all running away from set every minute they
ragged, dude.
Yeah.
So I understand. But, if it were me, I would have said, come on, guys, we can do it.
We can do it.
We can do it. But either way, that kill is also extremely brutal. But the fun thing about the movie, though, is not all the kills are that brutal. Like, you have an off-screen kill. You have the underwater kill where a girl is just drowned. Mm-hmm. So not all of them are gratuitous. It's just, whatever Johnny decided to do in the heat of the moment there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that yoga kill will be the one that people will talk about for years.
Yeah.
In fact, the only other kill that I can think of that was as like crazy, in recent memory, and this is why I thought with the log splitter scene we were gonna get a hot dog style kill, just like straight down the middle, was the only other kill in recent memory that I can think of that it was as shocking to me was the Terrifier 1 kill where
the chainsaw down the middle.
Yeah. So like that's the kind of level if you know Terrifier and you were like, whoa, that was crazy. You don't know nothing until you've seen this yoga scene, dude. Art the Clown is like pissing his pants in envy over the yoga kill in this movie, dude. But yeah, do you have any other like notes about the production or anything you wanted to hit?
Just some stuff towards the end of the movie. It was
because otherwise I just have like comments about the.
Well, yeah, let's talk about
the tail end of the movie.
Go ahead.
So, and again, slight spoilers, but again, the spoilers aren't really what the movie's about, so I wouldn't worry too much. So the movie ends with our quote final girl. She is the final girl, but that's not really what the movie's about anyway. But so the movie ends with Chris, the final girl, essentially sprinting through the woods away from the final conflict. The group has sort of like formulated this plan on how to stop Johnny. They're gonna burn him down or something. But at some point when the characters the characters of Chris and Colt, they meet up with the park ranger who has hence survived a encounter with Johnny. He sort of like, as Johnny is stalking them, you hear from a distance the backstory of Johnny. And Johnny's backstory is like whatever. It's tragic. It's like his dad was like a logging guy and something happened and a bunch of these people got pissed at the dad and then killed the dad. And
it's actually a class struggle story. The dad was
Yeah.
the guy who ran the company store at the logging company.
right.
So everyone got pissed off at him for being essentially, you know, the fucking
The man?
the bootlicker, the man. And so they always tortured this poor, you know, like deformed child.
Yeah, right. Like, so Johnny they call him slow, right? That's what the term they use in the movie.
Yeah.
So we have like a kid on the spectrum whose dad is like the boss of this logging company. The dad gets killed, and so does,
Well, they try to fuck with Johnny by bringing him up to the fire tower.
Yeah.
And their objective was just to kind of scare him, but he accidentally falls off the tower and dies. So they're like, "Fuck, we got to burn this whole thing down."
So there you go. And so essentially the hook of the plot is that Johnny's according to the park ranger, Johnny's spirit is restless and angry because of the murder of his father. And according to the guy, this locket that sort of like starts the whole movie when it's taken from his quote burial place. The locket was given to him by his mother, who said it was like, "Oh, the locket will always protect you because it's
from your mom.
It's full of our love, mommy love, right?" It's very Jason, very
Yes.
Pamela Voorhees, right? And we even get like a and I loved this. There's a scene at the beginning where Johnny walks into a house of just like this schmucky like redneck guy who is leaving bear traps all over the woods. And the park ranger that we see, and he has no name. He's just called the Ranger, in the titles. The Ranger is like, you hear in the distance, the Ranger's like yelling at this guy at first, and the guy's like, fuck you, bah, 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 bah. I'll leave my traps wherever. And so Johnny walks into the house, and Johnny's not looking originally like to kill this guy. He just is like, I'm just looking for my necklace.
Yeah.
And he finds a necklace that just says "number one motherfucker" on it. And in fact, later we see that guy after Johnny kills him, and he was also wearing a hat that said "number one motherfucker."
I love that that's his whole brand.
And the whole time, all I could think of was, he was number one. He's
Schmitty,
Schmitty
Weber,
Werberman
Jensen.
But yeah, so Mr. Number One over there. So, but Johnny grabs the necklace at first thinking it's his, the one that he's looking for. And he looks in the mirror as he's holding it up, and you get like this like ghostly, very, very 80s, like ghostly,
Yes.
magical visage of his mom being like, It's because I love you, Johnny. And it's just like a little hint, and it never shows up again in the rest of the movie, which is what makes it like a little treat. And it's definitely such a like a 80s homage, you know? But so Johnny's really looking for this necklace, right?
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
So it looks like we have a live update. We got some material here from Spooky Wife in the chair at the screens. Oh, mid record is breaking.
Wow, breaking news. Artsy slasher written and directed by Chris Nash will see an estimated weekend gross of $2.1 million.
Fuck yeah, nice.
Pretty nice. Late Night. This is Late Night with the Devil by Cameron and Colin Cairns, which opened at $2.8 million. Is pushing $10 million. Also pretty good.
That's good.
Yeah. All right. So Chris, right? You know, she ends up sprinting through the woods all night, but only after they formulated this plan, right, to trap Johnny and burn him down, essentially, for whatever reason that's the plan. The guy who the ranger is like very unhelpful. He just is there to like explain the plot to them. And
it's great because he's not even explaining the plot to us.
No.
It's just to those guys.
Well, yeah, to them, and also he's not doing a very good job. But regardless, you know, so Chris, after all of her friends have been murdered, she decides to just like abandon ship and just leave. Like she just goes, she's supposed to enact a plan, but she just ends up not. And she just leaves the locket onto the gas can that she was going to use to burn the guy down. And then she just sprints through the woods, right? Mm-hmm. She just sprints and sprints and sprints. And this is what you were referencing earlier, where we get all those scenes of the woods going going mad,
crazy,
right?
Yeah.
And it's actually, it's really, that scene is kind of like haunting because it's just shot after shot after shot of this chick like sprinting through the dark woods, and you're hearing the whole time, because the reason she like decides to bail on the plan is because there's her other love interest, right? Which would be interesting to see in the flip side of the movie, right? Because the whole twist is like, or the whole thing is she's there with her boyfriend Troy, the guy who sucks. Mm-hmm. But she's also brought along her like friend Colt, who has all this trauma.
His dad died recently,
or like maybe molested him, maybe based on some dialogue that I might have heard. There's this trauma, right? That this guy had, and then the boyfriend Troy is like, why'd you bring that guy? He kind of fucking sucks, and he's bringing down the mood. And then Troy dies, and then she's clearly like clicking with this dude, and so Colt is like, don't worry, I won't let anything happen to you. And then he immediately dies, but he dies so horribly, like not in anything creative. It's just like he takes like an axe to the head, and then we get a solid like minute 30 of Johnny just absolutely axing the fuck out of this guy's head, to the point where he's just, like, the dummy that they made is just like jello goo splattering the woodlands. Like, it's so brutal, and honestly it's not even that brutal, because it goes on for so long that it just becomes mundane, and you're like, oh, he's still going. Okay. Oh, he's 10-20 seconds later, you're like, oh, we're gonna.
I think it's great because it again kind of emphasizes what they talk about in the final monologue, where he is just like an animal that is driven by violence. It's at that point where he is chopping this man's head into fucking bits, and his goal is right behind him. She's wearing the necklace like 10 feet away from him. And she gives up on it, and he's still just chopping away.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. So that's what we get is the essentially the last scene that we in the movie that we see of Johnny is him going absolutely ham on this guy Colt's brain matter. Our quote, final girl Chris decides, instead of enacting the plan to kill Johnny, she's just going to leave this locket that she is now aware of, right? Like, yes. Because the ranger tells her and Colt that the only this is the only information we have on the situation. The lore is that the ranger says the locket is the only thing containing his vengeful spirit, right? Mm-hmm. And by removing it, they've unleashed him upon the forest of Ontario, right? White Pines or whatever it is.
White Pines.
And so all she knows is like, oh, he wants the locket, so she just leaves it there. She leaves it, places it right on the gas canister, and just decides, I'm out. But she's sprinting through the woods, right? And this is where we get what you were talking about, is like it was some really good sound work, because you and amongst all of the like agitation of the forest, you're also hearing the almost like melodic like chop 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 as he just won't stop hacking at this guy's head, and she's nowhere near him anymore. But it's like it's just overarching every sound in the movie,
echoing through the woods. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's really good, extremely tense, and very scary. And she runs through the woods all night until the next morning. We see her. We cut to like it's daytime. She's at some point fallen and like gotten impaled in the leg by like a stick,
similar to the trapped animal in the beginning.
Well, yes, this is true. She eventually dislodges it and then wanders onto a road, where she is then picked up by a character just titled The Woman, who picks her up, and it's basically the end of Texas Chainsaw. A pickup truck scoops up our main character and whisks her away to safety. Except in a normal movie where we're like a normal slasher movie where it would just end right there. This movie, again, is like playing on showing you stuff that you don't normally see.
Yes.
This movie shows you the stuff that like that most slasher movies deem as irrelevant.
Cut away from.
Right. So like you cut away from when the slashers just walk into the woods, right? You also cut away or end the movie at the rescue. Mm-hmm. But this movie decides, well, let's see what happens post-rescue. Like, what's the car ride to the hospital like?
Yeah.
And that's what I think is like, I see a lot of people, I've already seen a lot of people say like, oh, the ending was like miserable. It was so long and pointless. And I'm like, you guys are, it's not pointless. You're missing the point.
Yeah.
It's like where the movie is showing you like what is the car ride to the hospital for the survivor like, you know, like what happens there. We never explore that a single time until right now in 2024.
The director specifically did it that way too. He was like really interested in that scene. He was like, while I was writing the movie, I wrote it to end like Texas Chainsaw, but then the question kept gnawing me like, what is that conversation in the car like?
Because there has to be one,
Yes.
right? Like you wouldn't just go like bringing her to the hospital.
A cool little insert here. The woman, the actress who plays the woman is Lauren Marie Taylor, who is from Friday the 13th 2.
Mm-hmm.
And she initially, they were like, yeah, like you're this, you know, upper state woman. We want you to kind of be like upstate New York-y kind of. And so the first take or two, she played it up, like really hammed it up like a big time, like, no, New York lady. And they were like, no. We need you to bring it down to like a 3.
Yeah.
This is a woman who lives amongst the woods, who lives in this community. She understands the violence. She sees this type of stuff all the time. And she delivers this
Injured
gorgeous
hikers.
monologue about her brother, who was a Forest Service guy, who got mauled by this
a
bear, this like wild bear that was just going through. She's, what do you call it? Henhouse syndrome or something?
Henhouse syndrome.
Where
Yeah,
like
it's where animals just start killing things in their territory without the need to eat. It's just murder, seemingly, you know, as far as, you know, we can understand, for no reason. It's they just kill things in their territory. They leave the corpses. They don't eat them. It's not for survival. It's just strictly to kill. Mm-hmm. From what we know.
yes.
You know, we can't understand the minds of these creatures.
But that's our obvious comparison to Johnny, is that we might not understand what he's going through, but that's just like what he is now.
Yeah, well, and this is where I think the real interesting dialogue of the movie comes in, is because the movie ends and we'll just get out of the way. We don't see Johnny ever again. But the end monologue is so tense because of our own preconceived knowledge of slashers, because we're thinking like, she's doing this monologue. Is she in on it? Like, is she related? Maybe. Oh no, is she related to Johnny? Mm-hmm. Oh no. Like, and then she stops because the main character Chris like loses consciousness at one point, and she's like, I got to tie up your wound. Like, I got to tie it up before we get here. So she stops the car. And then Chris wakes up and is like, oh, please drive. Just drive. And you're like, oh, this is when he's going to come back and kill this lady and then get Chris. But again, nothing happens. It's just tension. And then like you're out of the movie.
But it's cool because we cut back to the like fuel tank that they were going to use to burn him, and
the locket's
where she
gone.
left the locket. Yeah, and it's gone. So like, he's clearly removed it and just
that's
moved on.
the final shot of the movie is the locket being removed from the tank. Not being removed, it's just gone.
It's just gone.
And I think what's like, this is where I have like some interesting thoughts. Well, I think they're interesting because I thought them. I think one of the main lessons of the movie is, you know what? Sometimes the simple answer is the correct answer, because there's a point in the movie where Johnny overhears, or Johnny and thus the viewer overhears the ranger talking to Chris and Colt, and Chris literally says, well, if all he wants is the locket, then let's just give it back to him. And the ranger goes, no, it's too late. His spirit is unleashed. The only thing we can do is put him down. Mm-hmm. When in actuality, Turns out all he really wanted was the locket. Giving it to him would have probably solved all those problems and not resulted in the deaths. Sometimes in horror, like it's not even just horror movies, it's just like life, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it really is the simple solution. Like, don't overthink things. Just give the guy the locket back, right? If that, because it really would have solved all of Chris's problems. He wouldn't have had to sprint to the woods all night. Just give him back the locket. That's all he wanted.
I just love all of the like analogy and comparison of like the beauty that exists amongst the violence of nature. And I think it's hilarious that they set out to make a movie about that and then had like nature absolutely fucking chew them up alive in production.
Well, yeah, that is very funny. But I also feel like the monologue, which I think is like really, really beautifully. I mean, it was like Flanagan level monologue for me. You know, it wasn't quite like Pearl, you know, but I do think I really appreciate a monologue, and I think the woman does like that actress does a really good job of keeping the tension going and keeping the story that she's telling interesting. But also, I think it's I think the story and Johnny divert. You know, like I don't think it's like a 1-to-1, because to me it felt like the movie's constantly talking about like nature and like the violence of nature and blah blah blah, but I don't think that like nature's violence is different than what we're dealing with in this movie. This is like man-made. Like I think this and this is totally my read, and it could be totally incorrect, but for me, like, everything that happens is because people constantly fuck shit up.
Yes.
Johnny wouldn't exist if it wasn't for people's greed and anger and misreading of just nature itself is doing its own thing, and everything that happens, you know, in a slasher movie, in this movie, is unnatural. This character is brought back to life because of vengeance, because of things enacted based on things that only humans would kill for.
Yes.
The rabid bear that killed the guy, that is just nature. Even if hen housing seems unnatural, it's not, right? It's happens.
Of nature. That is
the stuff that causes the events of this movie and any other slasher movie are always caused because of the unnatural stuff that humans are capable of.
Yeah.
Like our thought process has become so
divorced,
evolved and divorced from nature that we corrupt things. Like the reason like that shot with the creature caught in the bear trap, like that's not nature.
No, that's that douchebag trapper from the beginning just leaving traps out
for
to
no
kill
reason.
Stuff. Yeah, for useless.
It's specific. The movie makes a very specific point of saying he leaves it there for no reason. He doesn't need to eat. It's literally just for trophies and for the fun. He says for the fun of it.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's an interesting like exploration of and a juxtaposition of nature versus how humans corrupt things. Even in our most like, even if we like live in the woods, right? We still ruin things.
Yes.
Because we've just become, no matter how like off the grid you become, we're so far separated ourselves as a species from nature.
Yeah, we're not living in caves. Like, even if you're Ted Kaczynski, you built a shed.
Yeah, so like even when you say in a violent nature, like it's in a violent human nature.
Yeah.
Like, so even if you take a killer and you take a little boy and you destroy like everything about like every bit of humanity from him, and he becomes like, you know, oh, he's back to nature. It's not like the way humans ruin things. Even our ruined stuff is so unnatural. Like, and I think that's what's beautiful about it is sticking like what we consider like oh, we're back to we're animals now. We're not animals.
We're not animals.
When humans go animalistic at this point in time in 2024, it like, and you can stick it in the middle of the woods of Ontario, it's still unnatural, and that's why it's disturbing, right? Like, because we're not even, when we see people become animalistic and killers, it's it's something else. It's like almost like we get to eldritch stuff. It's not nature anymore. So In a Violent Nature is like a really, what I think is a really interesting title, because it's not nature, right? So, and that's what I find is like horrifying about it. And that's why, like, one of the things that spoke to me most is like, yeah, even if we like take people and bring them back to nature,
we're the
not
ones
there.
who apply the violence to it, because in the natural order of things, that it's not it's like you said, it's not violent, it's just nature. There is no like lens of like good and bad in nature.
Yeah, like just because like a bear kills things in its territory, like, and doesn't eat them, that doesn't mean it's unnatural. Like that kind of stuff has always happened for all time. But as people now, everything is intentional, and just because it's like barbaric and horrifying and animalistic doesn't mean it's actually nature. Like our evil is unnatural. It's not. That's what I find like so interesting about it, is calling it like nature, but it's not. You're still. That's why it's scary and effective, is because it's even if you stick this guy who's like born from the woods in this movie, it's still not natural. It's still not nature. It's still a juxtaposition. And that's still what makes it horrifying, and I think it's really cool.
That's how they show it. They show, like, anytime he's interacting with a person, it's violent. Anytime he's in the woods by himself, it's this beautiful, gorgeous, like, fucking nature documentary where he's just kind of like doop-de-doop-de-doo, walking around through the woods.
Yeah, I just, I just think this movie has like so much going for it, and I loved it so much, and it makes me a little sad. I understand that it's not going to be for anybody, but I really do feel sad for like the movie, because so many people are going to be loud online about not how they don't understand it. And
Pun intended, they won't see the forest through the trees. Yeah.
And that's really, I mean, how I would end it is like a lot of people aren't going to get it, but that's okay. I think if it really speaks to you, it will speak to you in volumes. And I think it's like a really gorgeous movie. All things considered.
Absolutely. What I think is most funny is now after they've already made the movie, they've released the movie, the director thought like, oh yeah, maybe we'll do like a couple small showings, and then maybe someone will find it. It'll get picked up for streaming somewhere. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, we're doing like some regional showings and some cool stuff like close to home. And then it was like, oh, we're getting a little bit wider of a release. That's so funny and stupid. I can't believe that's happening. And then it was like, oh, wait a minute, we're getting like a major theatrical release like all over like multiple countries. Like, that's insane. That's not what this was supposed to be at all. Like, he just wanted to make this little project and, level up in his ability and move on, and now he's like, oh my god, I made something.
Yeah, it's
but
so
I will
fun.
say he's very humble about it and very honest,
and that's what you
like.
want to hear.
Yeah.
Like, that's I really, really appreciate. And we've done multiple movies where with directors that we love the movies and the directors for the same reason, right? Like Barbarian was also very similar.
Yep.
It's really like, I think the key to making like a really, really, I think, long-lasting horror movie. Like, I think we'll be talking about Barbarian. We're talking about In a Violent Nature, and there's plenty of others we've done on the show that we'll be talking about for a long time. And it's because the directors and the whole crew, they like understand. They're not pretentious. They're not trying to like. They just love horror, and they understand what it can do.
They're not going for like a money grab. They're not trying to accomplish some like feat of insane filmmaking. They're just like, we want to make this project honest and with the intention and passion that we have for it.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful, and I think this movie does it flawlessly. Again, I understand it won't be for everybody, and it's okay if you don't like it. We're not trying to be pretentious here. Mm-hmm. We just loved it for complicated reasons and for not complicated reasons. We just loved every second of it. But if you don't like it, I'd love to hear why you didn't. What didn't speak to you about it, or why you thought maybe it didn't deliver on certain fronts. Like this is us leading into the end of the episode, so
Come hang out on Discord.
Yeah, hang out on our Discord, which the link will be in the description. Hit us up on Twitter, hit us up on Instagram. Like, we want to hear. Especially, I think this movie would be really interesting to have a dialogue about with certain people.
You could come chat with us live on Twitch.
Yeah, for sure. I would really love to hear more, especially about this movie, but just hear more from the listeners in general.
Yeah. What do you guys have on your lists for this coming summer? Because we are kicking off the hot, wet summer across all fields.
This is the official announcement. So we've teased it a number of episodes leading up to now. This is sort of the final intro into the summer. All aboard. The ship is leaving. We're heading to the middle of the ocean where no one can hear you scream. Hot, wet summer is in full force next week. We will be kicking off the summer. Matt's Hot Wet Summer will be kicking it off with an episode all about water and the ocean and all of the fears and scary stuff that lie therein. Sharks, deep underwater things, why people are scared of the ocean, why people are scared of water, what's scary about it, phobias galore. It's going to be a really interesting episode because we're going to be really diving deep into like what actually makes people fundamentally as a species afraid of the water. And why would it make us scared? We came from it, right? We all came from the water, so why is it so terrifying?
Well, we're going to find out. For a reason.
We're going to find out. We got our other friend Eric Jacks, our resident brain in a jar. He's going to come at us with some fun science facts. And it's going to be a really interesting episode. So if you want to learn a little bit, in addition to being entertained, next week's episode is going to really be for you.
Holy shit, we're doing edutainment.
Edutainment. You never thought we'd get here, would ya?
Fuck yes.
But yeah, so do you have anything else you want to speak on? Any final cuts before we ship them off?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be checking out the movie Elephant that we talked about earlier.
Touch on it a little earlier.
I wanted to check that out. It looked pretty cool. What else have we been watching?
Have we done an episode since we watched them?
Yes, we talked about them.
I did talk about them. Okay. Oh yeah, in the roundup, right? Well, we finished it. It was
Arcadian.
Good. Oh,
we're not going to be doing an episode anytime soon because of the hot, wet summer, but we did intend to do an Arcadian episode. Go watch that. Yeah,
go watch Arcadian.
Movie.
It's a Nicolas Cage joint, also starring I forget the actor's name. Forgive me. He was Bill in It, the 2019,
the Bill Skarsgård.
The Bill Skarsgård. It's the young kid who played the main character in those movies. He's in this with Nicolas Cage along with another actor. The actors really are pretty irrelevant to the movie. The movie is good, but mostly because it has some of the craziest monster designs we've ever seen. So if you want to see like a really crazy, insane creature feature, go check out Arcadian. It's wild, dude.
And if you're worried that Nicolas Cage is going to be the forefront focus of that movie,
he's really not.
He's not. Trust me. He gets sidelined pretty early, and then we don't see him till the end.
Surprisingly little Nicolas Cage in that movie. I thought it was going to be all him. Kind of like how, A Quiet Place was like mostly John Krasinski. I thought it was going to be the same. No, Nicolas Cage gets right out of the movie pretty quickly. And not like dead. He's just kind of like in another room.
Laid up. We'll call it laid up.
Which makes it extra funny because like dead would be one thing. You'd be like, oh, remember when Nicolas Cage died? No, you're just like, oh, where's Nicolas Cage? Oh, he's just like in a bed over there. But no one's going to look at him. But no, the monster's insane. All I can say is the visual design for the monsters in Arcadian, inspired by Goofy.
I was about to say, would you call him Goofy?
Yeah, I would. Be inspired by Goofy, and if that makes you think, what could that possibly be like? You can't imagine it, so you're going to have to go watch it.
But that's it. That's all for us this week.
Yeah, that's all for us at The Devil's Cut. You can catch us, again, the links to all our stuff will be in the description of the episode. Come catch us on Twitch. We stream Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now, officially, we've moved the name of the channel over, so go to Twitch TV/The Devil's Cut TV.
Nice and simple.
And that's us, Devil's Cut TV. It's not one person anymore. We got the whole channel on there. Until then, we'll see you next week with the first official hot, wet summer episode. But, until then, keep it real, everybody.
In the spring,
Bye-bye.
when I set out to go to work up in the woods in North Ontario, the unemployment office said they'd send me through with the little Abitibi and the survey crew. And those black flies, the little black flies, always a black fly no matter where you go. I'll die with the black fly picking my bones in North Ontario, in North Ontario. Well, the man Black Toby was the captain of the crew. He said, I'm gonna tell you boys what we're gonna do. They want to build a power dam, so we must find a way to make the little Ab flow round the other way. And those black flies, the little black flies, always a black fly no matter where you go. I'll die with the black fly picking my bones in North Ontario, in North Ontario. So we surveyed to the east, we surveyed to the west. We tried to make our minds up just how to do it best. Little Ab, what shall I do? I'm all but going crazy on the survey crew with those black flies, the little black flies, always a black fly no matter where you go. I'll die with the black fly picking my bones in North Ontario, in North Ontario. Twas black fly everywhere, a crawling in your whiskers, a crawling in your hair, a swimming in the soup, a swimming in the tea. The devil take the black fly and let me be with those black flies, the little black flies, always a black fly no matter where you go. I'll die with the black fly picking my bones in North Ontario, in North Ontario. Well, the bull cook's name was Blind River Joe. If it hadn't been for him, we'd have never pulled through. He bound up all our bruises and he kidded us for fun. He lathered us with bacon grease and balsam gum. And those black flies, the little black flies, always a black fly no matter where you go. I'll die with the black fly picking my bones in North Ontario, in North Ontario. Well, now the work is over, Black Toby says we're through with the little Abitibi and the survey crew. 'Twas a wonderful experience, but this I know, I'll never go again to North Ontario with those black flies.